Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. That was amazing. And this is going to be two. Holly McCall, of course, you know her. She's the editor, award-winning editor, straight-talking editor of the Tennessee Lookout. And Holly, we haven't talked in a while, and I've missed our conversations.
Well, it has been a while, and it's good to talk to you. Happy newish year still?
Yeah. I was just talking in the last segment with a colleague of yours, Patrick Houlihan, who runs the state's newsroom organization in the Minnesota Reformer up there, about what they're going through. Terrifying.
Man, they have been doing the Lord's work over the last few months, haven't they?
Well, I asked him at the end what he tells his team, on what they talk about and what they have to do to stay safe. And he just talked about, the gas masks they all carry around, that they don't go out without their lawyer's name written in markers on their arms and phone numbers and, all those things they have to do in Donald Trump's America in order to be the fourth estate. Terrifying.
Mm-hmm. It really is. I will be honest. We're going to talk about Tennessee, but I was sort of surprised, or I've been surprised, that we have not had at least one incident like a law enforcement shooting in Memphis, Tennessee, because Memphis is also where there is a federal law enforcement task force cited. The National Guard's been deployed there, and it's a majority minority city, the only one in Tennessee. And the law enforcement seems to be, they talk about how they're getting the worst of the worst, but in fact, they're not transparent at all. They're very opaque about what they're doing, about releasing statistics. They'll put statistics out, but with no way to independently verify. And mostly it looks like they're pulling over immigrants and people of color for traffic violations or alleged traffic violations. And I am certainly very glad it has not escalated to what's going on in Minnesota, which is, really horrifying and kind of unreal.
Yeah, we lived through some of that here in Chicago before they went up there.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. We learned a lot about how to organize resistance, and we learned a lot about how journalists can work together to cover this, and we did a good job, and then we went and taught the folks in Minnesota what we learned, and then they went and improved upon it like 100%, showing that Americans are learning from each other and getting better and better at standing up for what it means to be an American in this terrible time.
That does give me hope when I see people, particularly on social media, posting things about how depressed they are and, I can't believe we're going through this and we're not going to survive. But we do have 250 years of having sort of an independent spirit. And we broke away from England 250 years ago. And I see what's going on in Minnesota and the people who continue to get out in the streets and protest. And we haven't seen this kind of protest, I'm not sure, maybe since Lyndon Johnson, the Vietnam era, if ever. But that gives me a little bit of hope to see that people are not just rolling over for it.
No, we are not rolling over. Not. Well, let's talk about what it means at the end. I'll come back to that. Before, I want to talk about what's going on in your state, because my gosh, your legislature baffles me. A couple of years ago, we were talking after a terrible school shooting, and they had a special session, and their response in that special session was like, gee, let's make it easier to have a gun. Like, okay.
Yeah.
That was so and now we're doing it with immigration there. Oh, I guess they started last year doing it with immigration there.
Well, they did. I often say that Tennessee we are so underestimated. When people think about Tennessee, they like to think about Dolly Parton and music. And, in fact, I would say, lead the country in atrocious legislation from an equally atrocious legislature. And we just don't get enough credit for how terrible we are.
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to give yourself credit right here.
Yes, please. Let me pat ourselves on the back for being so ignorant. So, last year, as you mentioned, we did start start out the year, Governor Bill Lee, who I was thinking about this before we got on, he clearly wants something. This is the last year of his 2 years. He's got 2 terms in office. This is the final year, and he's clearly angling for something else. I don't know what that is. I don't know if he wants to be a U.S. senator. I don't know if he's still hoping to be appointed to something in the Trump administration. But at any rate, last year he held a special legislative session that was directed primarily towards 2 issues: private school vouchers, which is a show in and of itself, and immigration. And during that session, they set up an entirely new department, a centralized enforcement bureau. And, we also had a number of bills last year. There was one that would have purported to challenge Plyler v. Doe. That is the Supreme Court ruling that says
before we get to that, before you go there, go back to this immigration enforcement unit. Because I think you told me they didn't just create the unit, but they created it exempt from public records laws.
Well, that's correct. It is exempt from public records law, and we, of course, had a number of conversations with, there's a great organization in Tennessee called the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government. We had a conversation with them about how do we get around this. And while this department is exempt, the other departments they communicate with, for instance, the Tennessee Department of Transportation, the Department of Human Services, those are not exempt. And so we try to get records by doing an end run.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, they created with this department, of course, a new immigration czar, and I couldn't tell you anything about him. Kids can really barely remember his name. He flies so below the radar. But there was a bill that last year that was, I thought, really bad that I was going to mention. It purported to challenge Plyler v. Doe, which is the Supreme Court decision ruling that says every child is entitled to a public education, even a child whose parents have come here without going through all the necessary immigration channels. And so it's a blatantly unconstitutional bill. It did fail. It passed in the House, which some people say here is the frat house, and in the Senate it failed, which we call that the country club. So you've got country club at one end of the hall and frat house at the other. But that, by the way, is one of the bills that looks like it's going to come back up this year. I mean, and there's so much the hypocrisy around that. It's just it makes my head want to explode. So the reason that it failed last year is because there were questions about whether or not the state would lose federal education funding. Now, take this apart. These are the same people who want the Department of Education to go away. And as I wrote in a column a couple of weeks ago, they're also the same lawmakers who like to say we don't need federal funding. We do things the Tennessee way. But yet they don't want to lose this funding from the department they want to go away. And by the way, Tennessee's budget, 40% of the state budget comes from the federal government. So I like to tell people I'm on the hypocrisy beat, but this one is even hard for me to wrap my head around.
Well, I guess, if they manage to get a case in court, this Supreme Court will likely take it up, and who knows what they'll do. They may. Well, it just is a matter of policy. It's a matter of policy. The idea that you would have kids, this has nothing to do with immigration. The immigration, you got to deal with immigration straight. But once you have kids in your community, to say you're going to leave them uneducated, or just wandering around the streets, I guess, while their parents try and work during the days, is so stupid. I don't know a better word for it. It's just terrible for the community. It's terrible for the kids. It's terrible for the communities. There's no policy upside to this. Well, in a normal world, with normal people, I don't even know how you define normal anymore, but that would make sense. But that brings us to this year's legislative session, and that Republican state lawmakers, leaders were pretty open and proud before legislative session started a couple of weeks ago about partnering with Stephen Miller, the architect of Trump's anti-immigration policies. And so one of the first things they introduced is they want to make it a crime for immigrants residing in Tennessee who are not here without legal documentation. So if you can't be here, if you're not supposed to be here at all, and you're going to be criminalized, there's no need for school, right? The purpose is to get every immigrant
out of the state who does not have legal documentation. But as we've seen, that's a very slippery slope, right? Because that's not who's getting detained. And this whole worst of the worst thing is just bull. So they really just don't want any immigrants who aren't here with and then what does it mean to say they've got full legal documentation?
I don't understand any of this. So if they say, okay, you're here illegally under Tennessee law, what are they supposed? Does that mean that Tennessee is now going to build jails and put them in the jails and pay for that? And so instead of people being there and working and contributing and paying taxes, Tennessee taxpayers are going to have to reach into their pockets, build jails, and then house these people for the crime of not having their papers.
Well, yes.
Because they can't say to them, you're illegal here. Tennessee doesn't have the power to pick them up and move them to Illinois.
Right. So we love our prisons here, and Core Civic, which is a huge private prison company, it's also leading the way in building these detention facilities for immigrants. It's based in Nashville and was started by, this was, 30 or 40 years ago, but it was started by Republicans who would work for the Republican governor. And it is one of the biggest campaign donors to state legislators, Republican legislators. They have an enormous contract with the state of Tennessee through the Department of Correction. The governor has called Core Civic a good partner. The Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation into a Core Civic prison just about a year and a half ago. I doubt at this point that's going to go anywhere, but because of the high number of murders, there was a riot in that same prison last summer, which ended up with a few guards injured, and yet, and also they failed at their contract, so they've had to forfeit millions and millions of dollars, and yet every year the head of the Department of Correction wants a bigger contract for them. So that's a long answer to, are you just going to build prisons and put them in it? Why, yes, we are. And as a matter of fact, our Speaker of the House a couple of years ago, when questioned about a criminal justice bill, said we can always build more prisons. Which I don't know. I kind of want to needle point that on a freaking pillow or something and give it to that guy.
Now it doesn't want to build schools, doesn't want to make housing affordable, doesn't want to spend the money on roads and infrastructure and bridges. But hey, we can become the prison state for the whole country.
Yeah, it's.
Wow, that is something to aspire to, Allie.
I'm a native Tennessean, and my family has been here since the 1700s. I live in the house. And I'm really fortunate. This is a beautiful thing that my great grandfather bought in 1890, and so I've got friends who've grown up here, and they say I just can't stand this state, and I want to leave. And I'm not leaving. I feel very, very deeply connected to my roots here and my family who's spent hundreds of years here, but it's really sometimes I think, what in the world? I don't know how anybody with a logical, rational, working brain looks at this and thinks building more prisons is a great thing to do, especially when the prison company is forking out hundreds of thousands to the people making these decisions.
Right, and crime rates are down. So you have to then declare a whole group of people new criminals in order to fill the jails. Right. So people aren't getting murdered, people aren't getting robbed, people's homes aren't getting broken into like they were just a few years ago. Those numbers are down, but we need to build more prisons. So what do? Oh, wait, there's this whole group of people. We can declare them illegal so we have clients for our jails.
Yep. And by the way, the governor has been super excited about this federal task force in Memphis. Now, Memphis has had crime issues for years. There's a lot of poverty there. And again, that's a topic for a whole other, show about the connection between poverty and crime. But the fact of the matter is that the governor even reported 2 or 3 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks before he announced his task force, that crime in Memphis was down 15%. And, 2 weeks, and says that he has not been talking to the Trump administration. But clearly, Tennessee's Republican leadership loves the Trump administration. They are so far in bed with them.
Well, okay, so the country is beginning to see a little bit of a backlash to this administration. Most people are appalled by what they saw in Chicago, what they see in Minneapolis, really appalled. That poor kid Liam with the little bunny ears,
oh my God,
who they used as bait for his dad, and then now they're trying to deport him because he won his case.
Yep.
Or Donald Trump says, I'm suing America for $10 billion, and Pam Bondi has to defend us so that he doesn't put his hand in our treasury. Yeah. I mean, Americans, I think, have said, okay, enough. And his poll numbers are dropping. I've never seen anything like it. There never has been a catastrophic political change for the incumbent party like this one. Is that not felt at all in Tennessee? I mean, are the Republicans, going to do just fine and they don't have to worry about anything?
Well, Trump's poll numbers have dropped in Tennessee. I'm looking at a poll that came out, I don't know, maybe 4 days ago. So in Tennessee, 43% disapprove of him, 53% approve. So he's still above water in Tennessee. But it's a 6% drop, which is not nothing. But he has won Tennessee every single time he's won, and he wins with a higher percentage each time.
Yeah, interesting. Tennessee's a fully gerrymandered state. I mean, I think you got 9 congressional districts, and 8 of them are held by Republicans. Any chance for a change in the next cycle?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Edwin. So I think there is a slim chance. So Congressional District 5 is held by a fellow named Andy Ogles, and he, I think, is one of the most – he's a complete Trump acolyte and sycophant. He's been endorsed by Trump every time he's won. He's now in his second term. He'll be running for his third term. He has called for a congressional investigation of Nashville's mayor because he says the mayor interfered with immigration efforts here. Literally, the mayor is getting so much heat from the left because they don't think he's done enough. And really all he said was these people don't share our values. So Ogles has called for a congressional investigation against him. Judges in Nashville, Davidson County had to ask for extra security after he claimed that they should be, I don't think he used the word exterminated, but it was something like that they were a threat to everybody in Tennessee because he found out. Yeah, that's the sitting congressman. And I'm really just scratching the surface. But at any rate, he has got opposition in the primary and in the general election from the Democratic side. I don't think he's going to lose his primary. He remains very popular with the Republican base. But there is a gentleman running against him. There are actually several Democrats running against him. But I think right now the odds-on favorite is the mayor of Columbia, Tennessee, which is also where Ogles is from. The guy's name is Chaz Molder. He has raised $1.2 million. He's got a whopping financial lead over everybody else. Ogles has raised about $231,000 in the last 2 years in the last election cycle and actually owes more to lawyers than he has raised because he's been the subject of so many investigations, campaign finance investigations. So I think there's a slim chance there because Ogles is disliked by sort of old school Republicans. And yes, there still are some who find this offensive. And, Mulder is a little moderate for some Democrats, but, I think he'll pull that crossover Republican vote, whatever's out there. So, there's a lot of there's national interest on this race.
Is this district, Tennessee 5, is that the one that used to be Nashville, but they cracked it in order to
You're correct.
gerrymander it?
Yes, it was held by Democrats for almost 100 years, and so now Nashville, which is the capital city and the second largest city in the state, has 3 congressmen representing it, none of whom live in Nashville.
Okay.
But hope springs eternal, Edwin.
I don't know. How can the rest of the state hate Nashville like that? Aren't they proud of it?
Part of that is, first of all, it's not, you can talk about Fox News all you want, but also there's been a death of small media outlets across the state. And there's a near news desert between Nashville and Memphis. And, that's 250 miles apart. They're still small town newspapers, but they don't have the bandwidth to report. And so all they're getting in publishing, or all they have been getting in publishing, and I don't blame them, is press releases. And we are trying to fill that gap because
is local TV cover most of the state or not?
Like
the Nashville Signal covers how much of the state?
I mean, it covers. Memphis has got their own TV.
Yeah.
Knoxville, Chattanooga, everybody's got their own. And, I don't want to diss anybody in journalism these days because there are few enough out there doing it. But, TV reporters have never typically had, a beat to cover their general assignment. And so you don't have – and there's a lot of turnover. So nobody's got that sort of institutional history and knowledge of what's going on.
No, that's why we got you. I mean, you guys are doing that job.
We try. We've got a good crew. We've got some young folks on our staff who are super energetic that have skills us old-timers don't have. But then you've got, we've got a guy named Sam Stockard. We've got Anita Wadwani, and we've got me. And, I won't say how much experience we have combined, but like Methuselah. But we do have that institutional history. And we do content share. And I think that's the best thing we do. I love when I see outlets in West Tennessee being able to pick up our stories about state government, because I think that's the only way there's going to be any change.
Yeah. Well, wow, that just does not sound – I'm surprised. I mean, I wanted people to hear this, and I wanted them to hear from you today, in part because, the reaction – I mean, Illinois was always – blue, and when ICE was here, there wasn't, and it had no support, none, zero, and even the old Republicans here were running out of their houses in their pajamas to try and chase them away. Minnesota's a much more purpley state with Republican legislature, but the behavior there, according to Patrick, your colleague, this is shifting voting patterns. They're getting ready for a blue trifecta in the state, in part because of the reaction to this. And then there's Tennessee, where you have a little bit of this in Memphis, but the state is all for it.
Yeah, and I've got friends who are Democrats who think I'm a pessimist or a cynic, and I'm not a pessimist. I'm a little cynical, but I also think I'm a realist, and I don't expect there to be any shift in the legislative makeup this year. But we've got a legislator running for Congress who wants to. He's got a bill that says that naturalized citizens can't run for federal office. It's grossly unconstitutional. If you're an Army brat born on a base in Germany, you wouldn't be able to run for Congress. I mean, it's going to get. I hear silence. And somebody's like, "It's not going to pass, is it?" I was like, "Yes, it's going to pass. There's going to be a lawsuit afterwards."
I can't even. I just can't. I don't understand how that is politically helpful. I guess it is, because people want to be thugs and are happy to do it, but. When this era comes to an end, and it'll come to an end, there's going to be a big reckoning. There's going to be a big reckoning. And I don't know how folks in a state like Tennessee, where they're not responsible for the horror show in Washington, but they didn't blink. It's going to be very tough.
It's going to be rough, and I'll tell you who's starting to feel it are farmers. Agriculture is I think our second largest industry, and we still
they've been brutalized by this administration. Yep. Brutalized all over the country. Yeah, yep. And they may vote differently. Yeah. But I was thinking of something else. I mean, Holly, I don't know if I ever told you the story. Right after the Berlin Wall fell, I went to what used to be East Germany. And I went to this former concentration camp called Buchenwald, which was this extermination camp in this beautiful forest where they murdered so many people. And the guide who took us through was crying the whole time. And I finally said, "You've been a guide here for a long time. Why are you weeping so much?" And she said, "I've been lying to people who've come to this camp for years. Only after the wall fell did I finally see the documents the communists wouldn't let me see. And I now know that this camp did not exist only to put down the communists. That's not the true story here. And I am furious to the point of tears that I have been repeating the lies that have been fed to me for years." And I kind of feel like a lot of Americans are going to be her.
They're going to be a lot. I also think, to carry on with that analogy, we know there were German people who lived near concentration camps who, after the war, were like, what? I had no idea there was anything going on here. I just thought they liked to barbecue a lot, right? And I do think there are going to be a lot of Americans, and I think particularly a lot of congressional Republicans when this era is over, who will hear from them like, oh, I was really working against it. I just had to be quiet about it. They'll never admit they were wrong.
Right. I know. I ran for governor against a crook in my state 20 years ago. He beat me soundly, Rod Blagojevich. I got to go on with my life. He went to jail. But nonetheless, Holly, in the time since then, if all the people who told me, hey, I voted for you, did, I would have won, 5-1. Of course, that nonsense is going to happen.
Yep. Well, as we wrap up, because I know we're running short on time, when I ran for office in 2016, I had a former Democratic lawmaker say to me, the only people you can trust are the ones who say to you, I'm never going to vote for you.
That's probably right. Well, I'm glad you did. I don't think I focused on that. I think everybody should run for office. It's an amazing experience.
So do I.
It's a very American experience. You learn about yourself, but also about the communities, and win or lose. And I've done both. You end up much more hopeful because of what you've seen from ordinary Americans. It's a great thing. Yeah. And we're seeing it now. The whole country's seeing it on the streets in Minneapolis and everywhere else. Yeah. So
let's talk about this more some other time.
Yep. Thank you, Holly. As always,
All right.
It's a great
Thanks,
pleasure
buddy.
to talk. Bye.
Good to catch up, Edwin. Bye.